Todo ser humano tem três vidas paralelas, uma pública, uma privada e uma vida secreta. É o escritor Gabriel Garcia Marques escancarando o ser humano. Será que isso vale para os tempos de internet? Eu vou consultar um especialista, um dos maiores em segurança da informação no mundo, um hacker, caçador de hackers. Seja bem-vindo ao Provoca, direto da Finlândia, Mikko Hyppönen. Bem-vindo.
Thank you very much and thanks for having me.
Você aí fala com ele na hashtag Provoca e nos comentários do YouTube. Ô Mikko, eu disse que você é um hacker. Explica aí para minha tia, lá do interior, o que você faz, inclusive na sua empresa, a F-Secure.
Well, I've been a hunter of hackers almost all of my life. I'm a programmer by background. I started programming when I was 12 years old. I was selling my first programs when I was 14 years old. Now I'm 51. And all this time, almost 30 years, I've been looking at the security and privacy of computers. And the biggest change that has happened during these decades has been, of course, the internet. In my early days, we were using computers, but they were not connected to each other. Today, of course, every computer is online, everybody has mobile phones, and this has massive implications to both our security and privacy. And my job is to protect people's security and privacy online and try to understand who are the people doing all these attacks against our systems.
Você se diz um caçador de hackers. Como que é essa caçada? É um jogo assim de gato e rato?
It used to be a game. In the early days, all the viruses were being written by teenage boys for fun. When I started my career, that's what we were fighting. Today, it's totally different. Today, the teenage boys are long gone, and almost all of the malware we find today is being written by organized criminals, and they write them to make money. Money is the main motive for online crime. Money is the main motive for online attacks and for online malware. This is cases like banking Trojans, stealing money from people's online bank accounts, or credit card theft, or password theft, or attacks against PayPal, or ransom Trojans. So the whole situation has changed. And our job is to try to understand where the attackers are coming from. How are they doing these attacks? How do they move their money? How do they try to find their tracks? The better we understand our enemy, the better we can fight these problems.
Eu queria entender um pouco o modelo de negócio. O hacker ou o cybercriminoso, ele é que é o ladrão ou ele vende os dados para outros criminosos?
Almost all of the underground underneath the public internet happens in hidden services. Tor Hidden Service is an example of that. That's the network of websites which you cannot access directly. It's the part of the web which you can't Google for. You won't be able to search for content. And those dark alleys of the internet is where online criminals communicate and organize themselves. So these organizations are organized crime gangs, but they are not like the traditional real world crime gangs. They are virtual. Many of these people never meet each other, but they are organizations. They recruit individuals with different skills, like programmers and administrators and spammers and people who can move money, people who can hide the tracks. And then if part of the organization doesn't deliver, if someone doesn't do their job, they get fired and they will find someone else. So these are organized crime gangs, but they are very, very virtual, and they might not even know the names of the other criminals.
Como que você se tornou um caçador de hackers? O que te atraiu para isso?
Well, it's pretty simple. I got infected myself by a virus in the early 1990s. I still remember the virus. It was called Crew 2480. And 2480 is the size of the malware, which is tiny. I mean, you could fit it in 10 tweets, basically. That's how small it was. And I got curious. Like, what is this thing on my computer? How does it work? How is it able to replicate from one file to another on my computer and spread from one machine to another? Who wrote this? Why? Like, who's this guy? Where is he? I'd like to find him. That's what got me fired up. But I would have never imagined if someone would have told me in the beginning of my career that eventually the enemy we fight and the hackers I'm searching for are no longer teenage boys, but they will be organized criminals, or they will be working for governments, for governmental intelligence agencies, or for foreign militaries, or other governmental entities. That would have sounded totally like science fiction, but that's exactly where we are today.
Dá uma ideia para quem está nos vendo agora o quanto que ela está exposta a algum tipo de invasão.
We can take every single attack we've ever seen and put them into two different groups. Either it's a technical attack or it's a human attack. Technical attacks are vulnerabilities in the systems or weaknesses or programming errors, bugs in the code. And the way you fix those is that you update your system. This is why it's so important for everybody to update their systems. When your phone prompts you that there's a new operating system, you should take it. When your application asks you, can it update, you should update, because typically you get better security. So that's part of the problem. But then the other part of the problem are the human problems. These are the attacks where users are fooled into clicking at a dangerous link or opening an attachment from an email, and the attachment is malicious, or fooling the user into giving their password on a phishing web page, which looks real but isn't real. And human problems are much harder to fix because humans are human. We fail. We can be fooled. And turns out we're especially easy to fool when we are scared. This is why during this pandemic year, we've seen a lot of scam emails and phishing attacks which try to scare the user, for example, by sending a message that there's been an outbreak in your neighborhood. Click here to see who's been infected. People get scared. When they are scared, they don't think straight, and they will click on the link and then give in their password, and they will lose their accounts. And once you've lost your account, that's only the beginning. Especially email accounts are very problematic. For example, Gmail. Lots of users run Gmail accounts. Well, if your Gmail is taken over, then the attacker can take over anything else. You see, the login page for every website, for every online store has this magic button. There is this magic button on every login page which says, I have forgotten my password. And when the attacker gains access to your email, then they can go into every online store, try to log in with your email address, and then click the magic button. I have forgotten my password, which means they will send a new password to your email. And if they already have your email, now they can gain access to everything else. This is how criminals make money.
Vamos ouvir o que as pessoas, então, estão com medo aqui da nossa conversa. Vamos lá. O Júlio Codazzi te pergunta. Pergunta para ele qual é a senha do meu e-mail. Perdi e nunca consegui recuperar.
Well, I'd love to tell you the password, but the truth is I don't know his password. But an easy guess would be that his password would be password, or maybe password number 1. Because that's what people do. They choose passwords they can remember, and then they use the same password everywhere. So the real solution to passwords is not to try to remember passwords at all. You should do what I do, which is use a password manager. That's a piece of software which runs on your computer, on your phone, and on your tablet. And it remembers your passwords for you. And that means you can have a unique long, complex password for every different service because you don't have to remember them. It will remember them for you. And when you change the password on one of your devices, it will synchronize it to other devices. The only password you have to remember is the password for the password manager.
Mas será que esse browser é confiável? A gente sempre fica desconfiado de soluções tão simples.
There are different types of password managers, and I prefer the kinds of password managers where the company who makes the password manager doesn't know your passwords. So the passwords are not stored at the password manager's own servers. Instead, they are encrypted and stored on your own devices. And what the password manager does is that it synchronizes your password between the devices using encrypted connections, which means even if the company who made the software gets hacked, they can't lose your password because they don't have it.
Eu anoto as minhas senhas, só que eu reparei que eu anoto no computador. Aí eu vi que eu estava muito exposto, né? Agora eu tenho elas anotadas num papel. Onde que eu devo guardar este papel? Na geladeira, debaixo da cama?
Well, I don't really recommend a piece of paper. But then again, seriously, a piece of paper is better if it means that you have a strong and unique password for every different site. That's actually more secure than using the same password on every site. So if you have a piece of paper and you put it in your wallet, well, I guess most people try to keep their wallet safe already. And it also means that the attacker has to be local. It has to be someone who can reach your wallet. An attacker from the other side of the planet can't reach to your wallet and steal your piece of paper. So it's not the safest way of using passwords, but it's actually not as stupid as it sounds.
Oi, um super hacker burlou as nossas medidas de segurança e está usando o wireless daqui. Vou levar o roteador aí para você mudar a senha.
Tudo bem. Qual a senha atual?
123.
Na última década aconteceram tantas coisas que a gente ainda não teve tempo de acompanhar. O seu chefe, o Risto Silasma, resolveu tirar um tempo, ele que é um grande estudioso disso tudo, porque ele achou que ele estava desatualizado, resolveu estudar machine learning. Eu queria que você nos dissesse, todo mundo que está nos vendo deveria fazer como ele, parar e estudar machine learning. Para quê?
Now, I'm not telling that everybody should do this, but everybody should be interested in technology around us. And for decision makers, for business leaders, for board members of big companies, there's no excuse that they wouldn't understand how technology works or how artificial intelligence works. These affect the future of their companies. They absolutely should understand how they work. And if that means going back to school, going back to take some university classes or courses, then they should go and do exactly that.
E como que a inteligência artificial está transformando a nossa segurança ou a nossa insegurança?
There's good news, which is that we are not seeing viruses or malware using machine learning yet. The bad news is that they are using attacks against the machine learning systems of us, of the defenders. Today, it's almost hopeless to try to build a network defense system which is not using machine learning because there are so many attacks. For example, the amount of malware samples we collect every day is in hundreds of thousands. So there's no way humans could analyze hundreds of thousands of samples every day. We must use learning systems to do the analysis for us. Now, the attackers, the evil hackers, they know this. So we regularly see attacks where they try to attack the learning systems that we run. And they can, for example, send fake data, which will then cause our learning systems to learn wrong. The good news is that we are not seeing evil hackers using machine learning systems to create attacks yet. And the reason why it's not happening yet is that if you know how to program machine learning systems, if you're good with artificial intelligence, you don't have to go into life of crime. You can easily find a well-paying job from anywhere on the planet. But it's becoming easier and easier to use and deploy machine learning systems. And within a couple of years, it's going to be so easy that any idiot will be able to do it. And then we will start seeing malware which uses machine learning systems.
Atualmente, já é possível, por exemplo, automatizar toda a sua casa e controlá-la por um tablet. Eventualmente, você nem precisa controlar as coisas. Os objetos podem simplesmente reagir à sua presença. Você pode usar objetos como relógios ou roupas para monitorar constantemente seu pulso ou outras medidas do seu estado de saúde e avisar seu médico automaticamente em caso de problemas.
Ô, Mico, vamos falar um pouquinho de internet das coisas, né? Porque agora, não só smartphone, mas TV, geladeira, torradeira e até vibrador está no Wi-Fi. Como a gente ficar seguro diante dessa situação?
I am the father of the Hyppönen law. And the Hyppönen law says that if something is smart, it's vulnerable. So everything that's smart is also vulnerable, like a smartphone or a smart watch or a smart car. And it's a very pessimistic law, but it's also true. So if you think about a traditional wristwatch, you know, the kind of watch that you use to wind, which is completely mechanical, it's also completely unhackable. You can't hack a mechanical wristwatch. Then you look at smart watches, like today's watches which are connected to the internet. Of course, they can be hacked. When we add functionality and connectivity, they become vulnerable. And if I've been worried about smart devices, I think I'm now getting even more worried about stupid devices. You see, smart devices are the devices where we, the users, the consumers, we know that those things are online. Like a smart TV. We know that our TVs are on the internet because we buy smart TVs so we can watch Netflix. It's obvious that it's on the internet. But then there are things which are not obvious that they are on the internet, like kitchen appliances, the kind of things where you don't need an app or you know, an interface. Even those stupid devices eventually will be on the internet. Eventually, everything that uses electricity will be on the internet. And the reason why this happens is that data is so valuable. So the manufacturers want these devices on the internet so they can get data from the devices and, for example, know where their customers are.
Yeah.
Which means when it's cheap enough, every device will be on the internet.
E agora, um momento muito delicado do programa, eu vou hackear o celular do hacker. Mico, posso fuçar aí no seu telefone? Quero saber quais são as suas
No, you
preferências.
can't. I don't know if you know this, but Finland has more heavy metal bands per capita than any other country in the world. That's why I have a long hair myself. So I would be tempted to name like a local Finnish heavy metal band like Children of Bodom. I'm going to name a new band, a band which I found 2 years ago. It's a chip tune heavy metal band, originally from Italy. It's called Master Boot Records. And my favorite games to watch on Twitch are not video games. I like to watch pinball.
Ooh, the little flip. Got it. Ooh, a multi-ball.
But there's lots of channels where people are playing pinball, like real physical pinball and streaming it on Twitch. That's what I like to do.
Tá falando sério?
You should, for example, go to Twitch and check out a channel called Dead Flip. That's a great channel watching real-world streaming of real pinball.
Eu vou fazer isso assim que acabar o programa, porque no próximo bloco eu vou querer saber como está o Brasil no cenário dessa revolução digital. Será que os hackers brasileiros estão entre os melhores do mundo, tanto os do bem quanto os do mal? Será que gambiarra, a nossa virtude aqui, é competitiva? É no próximo bloco, a gente já volta. Em janeiro de 2021, aconteceu o maior vazamento de informações da história do Brasil. Dados de mais de 220 milhões de brasileiros foram oferecidos na internet, até de gente que já morreu. Em fevereiro e março, novos vazamentos de centenas de milhões de pessoas. O seu CPF, endereço, WhatsApp, quanto você ganha, tudo isso estava à venda na internet. Ninguém se salva. Vazaram dados dos ministros do STF, do presidente da República e muita gente. Ô Mico, as empresas e o governo brasileiro estão preparados para se proteger dos criminosos cibernéticos?
Clearly, they are not ready to protect themselves because we see leaks like this. And you often hear the saying that data is the new oil, or data is money, or sometimes even that data is the new uranium. Well, it's all true, because oil or uranium are both examples of something which is very valuable, but also very dangerous. If you work with oil, you have to worry about oil leaks. If you work with uranium, it might be very valuable, but it's also very, very dangerous for years to come. And this is the thing about data. Yes, data is valuable, data is being collected, but then you have to be able to protect the data. You have to be able to save it, to protect it, to keep it accessible, to keep it backed up, and keep it encrypted. And you have to be able to do that for years and years and years. This is a major challenge, and it's a challenge we see more and more organizations or even governments failing to do. And this is something we haven't understood. Data is not just oil or money, it's also a liability. And this also means that if you have no use for data anymore, you should delete it. And as we see, quite often it's not deleted, it's just neglected and abandoned, and then it leaks.
Em março, a Polícia Federal prendeu suspeito de desses grandes vazamentos. Pela sua experiência, qual é a possibilidade dele ser o único responsável?
Almost always when you have a big data breach or a big data leak, it's not just one individual. Information about a vulnerable system travels in the underground. Rumors go around. Sometimes this information is bought and sold, and then there might be multiple people gaining access to the data at the same time. Some of them try to gain access to information like this for money, so there might be blackmailing involved. Others are just getting information and leaking it out for no particular reason. The most typical attacks we see today regarding access to data is blackmailing or ransoms. And this is also the reason why we've seen such a growth in ransom attacks and ransom Trojans. And we've seen plenty of those in Brazil over the last years.
O Brasil é o principal alvo hoje de sequestro de dados. Por quê?
When we look at the international situation, one thing that makes countries bigger targets is the amount of legacy systems. Legacy systems meaning old and outdated systems. When you have old applications, old apps, and old operating systems, they no longer get security updates. They no longer get patches. They become easy targets. And when you have very large societies with millions and millions of users running old computers that can't run the latest operating systems, you end up with a situation like this. You end up with tons of vulnerable systems which can easily be hacked, and you end up with attackers who go after the low-hanging fruit. And unfortunately, in many cases, Brazil seems to be the low-hanging fruit.
Olha só. Tecnologia do século 22.
Nós tivemos encontro no Brasil onde eu te ensinei uma palavra em português, gambiarra. Você acha que essa virtude de ter criatividade com falta de recursos e usando isso para resolver problema é bom para o universo de profissionais que atuam em tecnologia no mundo?
I think it's the biggest richness Brazil has. We are talking to each other and there's like 20,000 kilometers between us, and it doesn't feel like it at all. We are living in a borderless world, and I believe we have a bright future ahead of ourselves. And I believe Brazil has a bright future ahead of Brazil, thanks to the these bright young people who are willing to go international and to use their skills for good.
Bolsonaro, tá aqui, Bolsonaro. Ignóbil, basculho, baixo, repugnante, canalha, deplorável, mesquinho, estúpido, obeócio, tal. Tem aqui, eu não contei, mas deve ter uns 100 adjetivos aqui. Parvo, pacóvio, inapto, desqualificado, pequi roído, genocida. Essa é a imprensa brasileira? Isso é saudade de corrupção.
Quando a democracia é ameaçada, como, aliás, está acontecendo hoje aqui no Brasil, qual é o papel de um profissional da informação, da segurança da informação?
When the internet was young, the politicians and the decision makers ignored it. They didn't care about this technological innovation at all because they didn't see the importance.
Yeah.
Well, today, this has completely changed. And today, politicians and decision makers understand very well how important internet is, not just as a mechanism of dissecting information, but in shaping opinions or even following the citizens or even controlling the citizens. And in many ways, we are now in the middle of fight for control of the internet. And this is something I take very close to my heart because we're the first people who were online. Like you and me, Marcelo, we were given a free and open internet. We got a free internet and an open internet. And the question is, what kind of an internet are we leaving for the next generation? Will it still be free? Will it still be open? It's really up to us. And we should be defending the freedom and the openness of the internet. And one of the things which is putting the future of the internet at risk is online crime. At any rate, we must be better in fighting online criminals and we must be better in defending our data.
Muito cuidado, alerta. Não deixem ninguém medir sua temperatura quando você for entrar nos mercados, porque eles estão apagando a memória da gente. Eu fui comprar cuscuz e voltei com carne, carvão e cerveja.
Como que as pessoas podem se proteger dessa tentativa de manipulação?
The internet seemed like the best thing ever when it came. For the first time, an independent citizen was also able to make his voice heard. Instead of just watching passively television or passively listening to radio, now we had a two-way mechanism. So it looked like, a paradise. Everybody can get their voice heard. Well, it wasn't paradise. The internet showed its ugly face fairly quickly because we learned what an effective tool the internet is in shaping opinions and how effectively information operations can be created. When the internet was younger, adults were telling their children that, don't believe everything you see on the internet and, have to be careful about the things on the internet because people could lie there. Yeah. Well, now, 20 years later, I think the children are pretty good in handling the information on the internet and being suspicious about what they see on the internet. And right now, it seems to me that it's the adults who are being fooled on the internet, who are believing all these conspiracy theories and who are falling for all these information operations. We are teaching our kids in the schools about, fake information and information operations and fact-checking, but nobody's teaching the adults. And that's why they seem to be easy to fool.
Então fale com os adultos que estão te ouvindo. Como que eles podem não ser enganados na internet?
Double check everything. Like, don't believe the things you see online. If it seems to be too impossible to be true, well, it's not true. If something is too good to be true on the internet, it's never true. Check the sources, double check the information. And don't pass on links and stories if you don't know if they really are true.
Tem pergunta aqui para você. Carlos Lacerda, ele acha que é ético o trabalho do hacker que invade por meios extrajudiciais para coletar provas?
Now, the word hacker gets misused by everyone because it sounds like it always means a criminal. And that's not true. Not all hackers are criminals. Hackers who break into systems to improve security or to expose wrongdoings. And we have plenty of people who steal data and leak the data not to make money, not to embarrass anybody, but to show wrongdoings and expose criminal things from happening. Also, we have people who break into systems just to improve the security of these systems. White hat hackers or people who do bug bounties. In fact, most large tech companies like Apple and Google and Microsoft pay hackers. This means if you are a hacker and you're able to break into Apple and then you tell Apple how you did it, they won't call the cops. Instead, they will give you money because Apple would much rather have you tell them how you did it instead of you telling someone else how you did it. This is why bug bounties pay so much money to hackers today. And that's what I recommend to anybody who's eager to hack, who wants to break into systems. Yeah, sure, go and break into systems, but do it within the rules of bug bounty. And then it's legal and you even get paid to do it.
We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
O que as big techs, as empresas grandes de tecnologia, Google, Facebook, Netflix, Apple, o que elas sabem sobre cada de nós?
It's kind of funny that we are now telling more about ourselves to big companies in Silicon Valley than what we tell to our spouses or to our families. Sounds crazy, but it's true. If you think about the things that people are making Google searches for, those are the kinds of things you wouldn't necessarily talk to anybody about. It's crazy. People are searching for things like, should I tell my girlfriend that I'm cheating? Or how do I hide this murder weapon? It sounds like a joke, but these are real things that real people are searching from the internet. And if you think about how we used to be, like when we were living in caves thousands of years ago, we had these wise people in our tribes. And when we had deep and troubling questions, we went to these wise people to ask for advice. Well, today we don't have those wise people. Instead, we have Google. We go to Google to ask for advice. We are telling all kinds of details about ourselves, not just to Google, but to all the social media players as well. Social media platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn can follow how we behave, how we follow other people. What is our social network? Who is our family members? Where are they? What do we like and what we don't like? And this, of course, has been built for selling ads to users. But what worries me is that the same information can be used for other things as well. And this is the reason why I've been opposing election campaigning on social media. It sounds pretty innocent, but actually it's really dangerous when you take the idea of voters and using this information, this profile information, which has been collected for the purpose of selling ads, and then using that information to influence who they vote for. This is the reason why I think voting on the internet is the last thing we should be digitalizing, and we should seriously consider banning election campaigning on social networks.
Mico, você sugeriu que as campanhas eleitorais aqui no Brasil, e o ano que vem nós vamos de novo ter uma eleição majoritária, não acontecesse na internet. O que você tem a dizer para o eleitor que fica lá fazendo a sua própria campanha, falando dos seus candidatos? Como participar da vida política sem acabar em fake news, em polarização? Você tem essa resposta?
I'm not saying politicians should not interact with voters or, citizens online at all. What I'm saying is that we should not allow Facebook and other social networks to sell their profiling data for election campaigns. This is the problem. Interactions with voters, interactions with citizens, having public talks, that's all fine. But when you pay money to social networks to learn details about your voters so you can micro-target them, it becomes very dangerous. And this is the thing we should outlaw. And whenever I speak about this, I get comments that, no, we can't do that. It's impossible, or it cannot be done. Well, you know what? It has been done. There's already countries on the planet that do this. For example, election campaigning on social networks is already illegal in Japan.
E na Finlândia, como vocês fazem?
The campaigning, like in all countries, has moved largely to the internet, and I see problems with that all the time. But Finland is a very strong democracy where we have very divided small parties. So we haven't really had the downsides that you typically would have when you have very large 2 or 3 party countries.
Yeah.
So I think we've done all right over here.
Diante de problemas tão graves que nos foi levado pela pandemia, com afastamento obrigatório, nos leve a pensar se não é hora de superar, não o outro diferente, não o outro polo, não de fazer necessariamente uma travessia se eu não estiver convencida, mas não ficar de uma margem achando que do outro lado é que tem um problema. Não tem problema nenhum, tem outro ser humano que talvez me convença que o lado de lá seja melhor ou seja possível.
E como a internet facilita a polarização? E o que a gente pode fazer com isso?
It's part of this mirror effect we see on the internet. It's just a reflection of the real world. But in many cases, it's like a reflection on steroids. It can amplify the goodness and the badness. A great example of this is that if you belong into a minority, you can find plenty of support from the internet. Now, imagine belonging to a sexual minority, for example, and you live in a small village in the middle of nowhere. Before the internet, you wouldn't know about any other persons like you. You wouldn't get any support from anywhere. Today, thanks to internet, you will find people like you, like-minded people, and you will get support from them. And that's great. But then when you look at the downside, it's exactly the same thing. You think about people who have destructive ideas, people who want to hurt others, people who like to torture animals. They will find support as well. So internet is the best thing and the worst thing which has happened during our lifetime.
E como furar esta vida dentro da bolha?
That's the question. And if I would have a good answer for that, I would have probably retired already. It is a hard problem to solve. And the reason why it's so hard is that it's all new.
Yeah.
All of this is happening for the first time. I guess it's going to be easier to see a couple of generations in. Right now, we're just along the ride. We have entered this brand new world of global digital networks, and nobody really knows what it all means.
Yeah. E a Finlândia, hein, gente? O que a Finlândia tem a ensinar para o Brasil e o Brasil para a Finlândia? No próximo bloco, eu vou convidar você para uma viagem para esse lugar que foi eleito pela 4ª vez o mais feliz do mundo. Um lugar frio, distante, chamado Finlândia. Aqueça a prosa aí na hashtag Provoca. O frio proferiu seus versos, a chuva chamou seus poemas, outras palavras trouxe o vento, as ondas do mar e as aves versaram poesia e frases, o cimo das árvores. É um trechinho do Kalevala, uma coleção de canções e causos populares antigos que contam a epopeia da Finlândia. Mico, pelo 4º ano consecutivo, a Finlândia foi eleita o país mais feliz do mundo. Parabéns, mas agora me entregue. Que terra é essa, hein? Da chuva, do vento, do mar e das árvores?
I guess it's a land of people who are happy with what they have. Content in their daily lives. The mindset of Finns is that, it's okay. We don't need, sunny beaches or warm environments. If we have our families around us, if we have our homes, maybe a job to go to, that's enough. and that's what brings us happiness.
Os finlandeses ainda dizem que existe uma palavra que define a mentalidade do país. Falam que a palavra é intraduzível, é sisu, que fica ali entre coragem, resiliência, resistência. Traduza o que é sisu para o Brasil.
Yeah, there's probably no good translation as a word, but I can tell you how I was taught what sisu means by my late grandfather. Because you see, my grandfather was living in eastern Finland during the Second World War, right next to the Russian border. And Russia is the biggest country in the world. We have a very big neighbor. Finland is tiny, we're small, we have 5 million people. And then when the Second World War started, Russia invaded Finland. Now, all the other countries which Russia invaded, of course, surrendered. Like, what's the point in fighting? It's the biggest country in the planet. Surely you won't win. Well, as my grandfather told me, that, they knew that they couldn't win. But they went and fought anyway, because that's what sisu means. It means that you go against odds knowing that you can't win. You go into a fight that you know you will not win, but you want to fight anyway to protect your way of life. That's what my grandfather taught me.
A Finlândia tem a melhor educação do mundo. Todo mundo diz isso, os números comprovam, mas eu pergunto, qual o segredo desses caras? O que eles fazem de diferente? A revolução da educação aconteceu nos últimos 50 anos. Não foi coisa de um governo, foi coisa feita com muita paciência e com muita determinação. O segredo deles é investimento maciço na educação básica. Criança aqui de 6 a 15 anos tem alimentação e escola de excelência gratuita. Eu tenho dedicado a minha vida a duas coisas, comunicação e educação. A Finlândia, para mim, é um paraíso, né? Por isso que eu tenho esse interesse aí. Me diga como a Finlândia se tornou essa potência em educação.
I think it's a very simple thing. It's about respect for the profession of teacher. People think it's an important work to teach our children. And when you think about it, there is no more important job. Like, what would be more important than teaching the next generation, than passing on the knowledge of mankind? So it comes down to the basic respect for the profession of teacher. And when you respect your teachers, you train them. All of our teachers are university trained, highly trained professionals, and you trust them. You let them choose how to teach. You don't shut them down with narrow curriculums and different rules. You let them teach the best way they believe they can teach to these children. And this is as simple as it is. And this is how we do it, and it works.
E o difícil é acreditar que é simples desse jeito que você está contando. E eu pude perceber isso. Como fazer uma sociedade valorizar a profissão de professor?
I'm not sure how well we can copy this model to other countries. I'd like to think it can be copied, but the reason why I think it's worked for us is that we are so small. We don't have people to lose. We need every brain we have, which means if you're smart, we want to train you as best as we can. We want you to succeed. We need you in the workforce. We need you to go to school. We need you to go to college. We need you to go to university. If you have brains to get a PhD, we need you to do that.
Eu acho que eu entendo, é que tem países que podem desperdiçar talento, porque acha que tem talento demais. Isso é muito duro que você está me jogando aqui na cara, viu, Mico?
A gente espera que um amigo seja mais educado.
Seja também não existe não, tá? Calma aí, só pra você saber, tá? Seja. Que isso, gente? É o mesmo grupo dela. Vai estudar.
Agora eu vou ter que contar uma coisa de quando nós nos encontramos aí em Helsinki. Era um almoço e você estava sempre, como sempre, muito elegante, mas com o símbolo do exército. no seu paletó. Você tinha passado a manhã trabalhando e me contou que na Finlândia todo mundo trabalha para o exército. E no subsolo de Helsinki tem uma cidade inteira lá, caso de algum ataque. Isso é o quê? É precaução ou é paranoia?
Well, it goes back to our big neighbor. Yeah, we have a draft system in Finland, which we've had since the beginning of our independence. That means that all the males do a mandatory draft in the military service, and all the females who want to, who volunteer, will do a draft service, which means you spend a year in the army and then you go back regularly for refresher training when they don't ask you, they order you to go back. And I guess the way it works in our society and the way it works so well is that, companies support this. Companies lose their employees to these trainings regularly, but they don't feel bad about it. They feel like it's a necessary thing to have because we have to have credible defense. We have to have a big army for our size of country because we have such a big neighbor to have a credible defense. And the only way we can have a country of our size can have a big army is to have a draft service. And that means that, I go back regularly when they order me to go back. The good thing is when I go back, they don't give me a gun. No, they give me a keyboard. I think I'm much more lethal with a keyboard than with a gun.
E o que você faz com esse teclado lá no exército?
Unfortunately, that's classified.
Chegamos num assunto que ele não pode falar. Olha aí que legal, gostei. O Brasil deu ao mundo a caipirinha, a Finlândia o coquetel Molotov. Qual que está mais na moda hoje?
Well, Molotov cocktail, unfortunately, is something you cannot drink. Let me explain to people who don't know what it is. It's a glass bottle filled with flammable liquid. Yes, it could actually be vodka. And we used to build these in our booze factories, in our alcohol factories during the Second World War. But then the glass bottle is equipped with a torch. Yeah. And so you light it up and then you throw the flaming bottle filled with a flammable liquid against Russian tanks. Yeah. This is the way we were stopping the tanks from crossing the border.
E Molotov era ministro russo, né?
Yep, we named it in his honor. But you know what? I think I'd much rather have a caipirinha than a Molotov cocktail.
Nos nossos dois países, temos uma tradição de automobilismo na Fórmula 1. Né? No Brasil é porque as pessoas dizem que pilotos dirigem loucamente pelas ruas. E aí na Finlândia, por que tem tanto piloto de Fórmula 1?
Well, it gets very slippery in the wintertime. So I guess everybody has to learn to drive in very dangerous or difficult conditions. That might be part of it. But I think even bigger part of it is that Finland has over 400,000 lakes. So there's hundreds of thousands of lakes. Many of the lakes are empty. There's nobody's living around the lakes. And all these lakes freeze in the winter. They freeze so deep you can drive a car on these lakes. And you know what? You don't need a driver's license to drive on a frozen lake. This means that if you're 12, you can take an old car and drive it around on a lake which is frozen, so it's very slippery. So you learn to drive a car very well when you're very young. I guess that's one of the reasons why we end up with Kimi Räikkönen and Mika Häkkinen and all the other Formula 1 drivers we've had.
Tem muita pergunta para você aqui. Eu acho que o pessoal te conhece aqui no Brasil, hein, Mico? Olha aqui, Demétrios, pergunta sobre a história do primeiro vírus. Você vai ter uma grande surpresa, em um só programa não caberá tudo.
The very first PC virus was written in 1986. So that's, a really long time ago. It's called Brain. And I remember analyzing this virus and being surprised because in the code, straight in the middle of the code of the virus, there's a street address. There's an address inside the virus, an address which goes to Pakistan. to the city of Lahore in Pakistan. So years later, I was wondering about the history of this first virus, and I went to Lahore in Pakistan, and I went to the address inside the virus 25 years later. And I found the people who wrote the virus. They are still there. Basit and Amjad, two Pakistani businessmen. And we had a very interesting chat about the history of malware and why they wrote the very first malware. And they explained to me that they wanted to prove how insecure these new PC systems were. And I guess they succeeded in doing exactly that.
Me conta outras esquisitices da Finlândia. Tem uma que eu descobri que entrar num site do governo, você consegue descobrir quanto ganha o seu vizinho, o seu chefe, e o dia que é publicado esta informação é chamado Dia da Inveja. É isso mesmo?
Yeah, it's true. It's always been like that. I guess it's also about the strong democracy and openness of the culture, which means the idea of seeing how much everyone makes money is also in the public domain. And it might feel a bit weird, but it's, again, something we've always done. So the taxman publishes tax results for everybody once a year. And this information is public, and you can go and check out anybody's income.
O que a Finlândia tem de melhor e de pior? Não é possível. Tem que ter defeitinho aí.
Oh, well, I'm sure there's lots of things that are wrong in our culture and with with the goods we produce or what we export. What do we do badly?
Ele está procurando, ele vai achar. Ele vai achar, tem que achar, não é possível. Olha, um finlandês procurando uma coisa que deu ruim na Finlândia. Olha essa cena, gente. Ele tá lá, olha, ele está buscando no HD dele.
No, we don't do anything bad. That's as easy as it is.
Qual é a profissão do futuro que você sugere aos jovens de hoje?
I'm going to give an advice which works in any field. It doesn't have to be IT or computers or technology, regardless of what you're working on. Find what you're interested in and then pick a niche, pick a narrow area of expertise, and then become very, very good in that. If you are the best in the world or one of the best in the world in something, you will always find a job. You will always find a great salary for the things you do. And you can apply this into any field. That's my advice.
Mikko Hyppönen, ou Hyppönen, o que é a vida?
Easiest way to understand, for me, what's going on and how this all works is to assume that none of this is real and this is all just a simulation. Maybe this is all a game made inside a much bigger computer by someone else. That would explain a lot. It would explain why we have, mathematical constants in the math, because it's all programs. Of course, there would be mathematical constants. It would explain nature and how basically all trees are clones of each other using fractal algorithms inside of them. It would explain a lot. And that would also mean that there would be God. Yes, God would be a programmer, but to me, that would explain how it all works.
Será que estamos agora neste sonho? Esta conversa existiu?
Nope, none of this happened. Sorry, Marcelo, but we are in a program.
Esta é uma das selfies mais distantes que eu já fiz na minha vida. Eu posso publicar esta selfie feita com hacker? Alguém vai invadir? Não.
Put it on your Twitter and I will retweet it.
Ah, vou fazer isso já. Kitos. Rivasti.
Bye bye, Marcelo, my dear friend.
Thank you.